Nietzsche says, I love this, definition of morality. This is the most cynical thing Nietzsche ever said, I think. The idiosyncrasy of decadence with the ulterior motive of revenging oneself against life. Successfully, I attach value to this definition. I said, well, why be an ideologue? Well, it's a good way to simplify the world, right? It's a Procrustean bed. You just chop off everything that doesn't fit. Then you don't have to think, right? So that's good because thinking is difficult and it's troublesome and it takes courage and so forth. To transform chaos into order is no trivial matter. And if it's all ordered for you, well then there's really nothing left for you to do. But then Nietzsche goes even below that. He says, yeah, well there's more to the story than that, isn't there? It's like once you got this little Procrustean bed all arranged for your enemies, then you can allow your most base vengeful instincts full flow by just continually chopping people so they fit. And you do it all the while by, well, saying, well, it's obviously the best thing that could possibly be done. And so then you look at Stalin, say, because not everybody who's adopted a vengeful tack on existence is sort of like the archetype of vengefulness or adversarial spirit, but you get now and then the people like Stalin who are good counterexamples, say, to the people like Gandhi. And so Stalin's very instructive, and so we could start by looking at what he did in the Ukraine. So at the end of 1929, the Kremlin decreed that millions of peasants from individually owned farms would be forced into agricultural collectives, or kolkhozes, seen in the eyes of the Politburo as pliant providers of Soviet agricultural needs. In defiance of the facts, Soviet ideologists hammered out an appropriate Marxist terminology to explain what was going on. Throughout grain-producing areas, it was said, resistance to this scientific scheme was being organized by so-called rich peasants, or kulaks. With his customary brutality, therefore, Stalin decreed the liquidation of the kulaks as a class. Well, Stalin liked this idea of like group guilt. That was a major theme for Stalin. Like, that meant I really didn't have to ever pay attention to you as an individual. I could just decide if you were a doctor, or engineer, or a kulak, or a German, or whatever ethnic, racial, or educational division happened to characterize my particular target at the time. And it didn't matter if you were guilty as an individual. That whole notion never even obtained. It was class guilt that mattered, and if you were in one of those classes, well, we were better without you. And of course the nature of the class just changed constantly, but it was a perfectly logical thing to think if you believed in like historical determinism. If your parents were rich, bourgeois, what was the probability that you were going to be a useful part of the workers' collective? Be easier just to get rid of you ahead of time so you didn't cause too much trouble. So then you think about these kulaks, rich peasants. Well, who were these people? Like when we get down to the individual level. So you go in a village. Village was full of serfs like not 40 years before. So these are people just struggling out of the feudal society, right? And you got some people in there who've managed to be successful enough as farmers, which is no easy thing, to like have a house and maybe hire one person and, you know, maybe have a little extra food in the larder and a few kind of material possessions. So these are successful people. And so you could say, well, they're the ones that actually knew how to farm. It's one theory. Or you could say the reason they had all this stuff was because they stole it from all the other people, right? And then you think, okay, so I march into town, I'm a Soviet revolutionary, and I say, hey, guys, you know those rich people? They stole everything they have from you. And then you think, okay, which of you guys is going to listen to that? Well, it's not going to be the sort of struggling people just underneath them who are really trying to get ahead, right? Because that's where they're hoping to get. It's going to be the resentful and revengeful few who think, well, the world's fundamentally unfair. And it's obvious that those sons of bitches got what they want by stealing it from me. And here it turns out that if I just go down the street and steal it back, well, not only am I allowed to do that, but according to this new and emergent ideology, man, that's the best thing I could possibly do. So then multiply that story by several million participants, and you have like the first 5 years of the Soviet Empire.